media with our president, Joe Patterson.
And you're kind of the official, unofficial spokesperson? Are you here representing?
It's official.
You're official. So
absolutely.
you're here representing the St. Louis County union position.
You got it.
Okay, good. All right, just to get that straight.
Yeah,
Now,
no problem.
All right, so Tony Messenger has a couple of stories the last couple of days calling into question police tactics on the Metrolink, pictures, allegations of covering up, sleeping on the job, texting, not walking the beat on the Metrolink. You called me up. You want to come on the show and talk about it. First, let's talk about the pictures and the allegations of the county police officers not doing their job as they're supposed to be doing on the Metrolink.
Correct. So first thing I'll tell you is that there's never been a time where I've come in here from the early days of the Ferguson incident to anything that's come up in the last 2 or 3 years, where I've come in and just tried to artificially make something up so that, we're trying to make police officers look good. I will always acknowledge to you and to your listeners that there are incidents of misconduct. Things happen, okay? And when those things happen, we can come in and talk about them, or I will come in and talk about it, and we'll say, here's what we think should happen. Here's what may have happened, but let's let an investigation take place. Let's let this officer have some due process rights, explain his or her side of the story, and then if there's a need for discipline, then we'll let the administration handle that disciplinary process. That is encouraged by this police union, by this police association. Follow the rules, and there won't be any discipline. Occasionally, we have officers that fall outside of that, and there could be discipline. What we're finding out after Tony's story dropped on Friday was that I can't believe I'm actually saying this. I think Tony's being used because we've already, just in a matter of about 48 hours, have isolated out several of these incidents that he's referring to. And I got to tell you, it's important to remind your listeners that Tony's not a journalist. Tony is a gossip columnist.
Well, he's a columnist.
He's a columnist.
He's a columnist. Gossip columnist connotes something else, but he's a columnist.
Well, this has got a lot of gossip in it. Okay.
All right.
So, which I think he may or may not be aware of. So, we have isolated out several of these incidents which have very logical, non-controversial, no rules being violated, reasons, not excuses, but reasons that these things are happening. So there are instances where officers are covering up cameras. Covering up a camera. Well, what I can tell you is that back in 2015, I was aware of this story. Since 2015, as the St. Louis County Police Union president, I have spoken to reporters from Channel 2, from Channel 4, from the Riverfront Times, and from the Post-Dispatch about what you ask, this same story.
About these.
No one's covered this story because they realized that there's a lot of non-issue here. I have talked on the record to reporters who have said, I'm not doing this story.
Okay, so what's the story?
Because Richard Zott's been shopping this story around like he's looking for somebody like TMZ to take this case.
Right. Okay, we'll get to Richard Zott in a second. But what's the explanation? Why would somebody cover up a camera for a number of hours? Why would somebody sit in this room for a couple hours with their feet up texting?
Because we have some instances where officers were changing clothes, okay, where officers were using the restroom, where officers were taking a break, where officers were having lunch. It does look bad, and I take some responsibility for that because I am one of the individuals, based on legal advice, that told officers when there's going to be moments where you need privacy, cover up the camera. That's me.
But aren't there allegations of the camera being covered up for hours at a time, though?
Yeah, I think there was a couple of times where they covered it up and probably left. And left that, again, doesn't look good. First to admit it. I'm right in line saying I understand that this does not look good. But there are no allegations of misconduct. There are no allegations that a prisoner was abused. There's no sexual misconduct allegations. This is officers in a small 10-by-10 room that's about the size of a prison cell that are taking their breaks, taking their lunch breaks, coming on and off duty. I mean, there's a photograph that they've published, and it has this nefarious, undertone to it that there's all these officers just lounging around. But would you be surprised if I told you that half of the officers aren't even on duty? They're going home.
And
they were assigned somewhere else, and that was their meeting spot. So we're looking at a picture. This is confirmed. This isn't me trying to do damage control. This is me explaining what's in the picture and actually providing facts, not rumor and not conjecture.
Right. And a picture is a moment in time.
Sure.
So in this instance, you're saying the one guy with the picture of him holding up, sure, that's an instant of him. Maybe it could be something nefarious, or it could be something as, hey, I'm changing my clothes. I don't want the eye in the sky looking at me.
And from 2.5 years ago. I addressed that issue with that photograph 2.5 years ago with different media outlets because, again, it was being, what I'll tell you is I kind of use the phrase, I say it's being shopped around.
Right.
This has been taken to every media outlet in St. Louis, and nobody gave it the time of day until last Friday.
Are any incidents in these stories something in which was wrong? Where you found a police officer wasn't doing his job. A police officer should have been on duty. A police officer should have been on the platform and wasn't.
The only things that we haven't been able to verify at this point, and that's because the story just broke on Friday, are these instances where there's not footage that we've seen, where there's not footage where someone is alleged to have done something wrong. There's an officer that supposedly slept for 8 hours. Okay, well, I want to see that. Okay,
right.
And if that's the case, that officer will be disciplined.
Right.
And I mean, and certainly if that's the case, probably it to some degree should be disciplined.
Right.
But when you have a photograph of a group of individuals who are coming on and off duty, officers that aren't even assigned to MetroLink, officers that were assigned to a different detail, but that was their meeting spot, and they're all crowded into this small office, it looks bad until you start saying things like this. Well, 4 guys are getting ready to start riding the train. 2 guys are in a vehicle that doesn't patrol the train. They patrol the stations. And 4 or 5 of the other officers are off duty. That all of a sudden starts to paint a slightly
right,
less nefarious picture of the photographs that are being shared in Tony's columns.
The story, Gabe Crocker, says that the tickets being written on the MetroLink is significantly down, assuming, leading, expecting, theorizing that the officers aren't out on the platforms, aren't doing their job, and aren't walking a beat, taking care of public safety.
Well, that's a great thing to talk about with the educated and mindful KTRS listeners, because there was something that happened in August of 2014 that caused a little bit of controversy around here in Ferguson. And we spent an inordinate amount of time over the course of that year, and including up to now, dealing with civil disturbances. So what you saw during that time period were officers being questioned in municipalities and in St. Louis County about the number of tickets you're writing,
right,
oppressive conduct in small minority-driven communities with low socioeconomic status, keeping people oppressed. Right?
Right.
So what you saw is, in many cases, a corresponding drop in the number of tickets being written. Now, why Richard Zott or anyone at MetroLink thinks that a fare ticket, which is you didn't pay $1.25 to ride the train from point A to point B,
right,
why he thinks that is going to somehow cure violent crime on the MetroLink kind of speaks to the reason that he's not getting along with a lot of people, because his ideas are archaic and rather silly.
Right. All right. So you're saying that the police officers didn't write tickets because, and this is important, and please answer these questions quickly because I have a lot more to get to.
Okay.
Do St. Louis County police officers write tickets for people who don't buy a fare on MetroLink?
It is a possibility, yes.
So you guys have that ability?
Yes.
Okay. How often do you guys spend time looking for fare jumpers?
Well, it's not a significant amount of time because it's not one of the significant problems on MetroLink, but it is a part of the officers' enforcement duties on MetroLink.
Gotcha. And so for 2004, 2005, 2016, 2017, clearly Ferguson changed the world. Were you guys told, how does that work? Did you guys say, look, we're going to go after the big crime, the small crimes, we're going to let them, jump in a fare, not a big deal, nice to meet you, have a good day, next time pay? I mean, was this a concentrated effort to sort of be more friendly to the riders of MetroLink?
So I would have to ask the commander that was overseeing that, but what I can tell you is that we had not only the issues of the ongoing problems with Ferguson, but the increased attention towards police officers, an evolutionary process in police work where we're trying to figure out what it is the public wants. St. Louis County was at the forefront of a lot of that controversy, and I think because of the time period that you see there is why you see, and again, cherry-picked by Metro to demonstrate, look at this significant drop, everyone, but providing no context or background as to why that drop may have been precipitated, okay? So we're fine with a ticket being dropped. What we do want to see are arrests and criminal activity suppressed. And are there problems on the MetroLink? You bet. Are police officers working to solving that as much as they can? Sure. Here's one example, very quickly. Is there's an allegation that these officers called out, and of course it's wrapped in this big, headline leading thing where the officers are covering stuff up, or where are they? They're hiding. Now they're not hiding. You know what they were doing in one case? They called out at the particular stop. They were conducting surveillance, McGraw. They were actually about 100 feet away watching a hand-to-hand drug transaction, then swooped down and made an arrest. They were at the location, but not on the camera. You see, there's context that I can't explain away every single image that Tony Messenger may have. But what I can do is provide some actual context and fact that can be documented, in this case, by a felony drug arrest, because the officers had the wherewithal to say, you know what, maybe somebody didn't pay $1.25 for the fare, but I would rather catch the hand-to-hand drug transactions with armed felons and armed drug dealers that are conducting their business on the train. Who do we want to target? And I think the public's going to back me up on that and say I'm a little less worried about fare skipping as I am about illegal weapons possession and drug transactions.
We had Tony Messenger on about an hour ago, and we brought this up, and it seems like this story, there are particulars over who's where, what, and in what room, and how long. And that's certainly worthy of a story and or explanation. But it seems like this is a bigger proxy war between Vince Shamel, Bi-State and Metro, Chief Belmar, Steve Stanger, and everybody. It seems like we're watching this proxy war play out with different little facts to make the other guy look bad.
Exactly. And I don't represent either side here of that proxy war.
You represent
I represent the police officers who are stuck in the middle of these plate tectonics of two different sides and ground shifts that are causing this friction. Right. But what I can tell you is I believe that one side is a little more culpable in this controversy than just digging up a few pictures that don't look good of police officers taking a lunch break. All right. What I can tell you is that on that other side of things, with the Metro side, you have a side that has been hell-bent on developing their own law enforcement agency. They want their own police department. This is money. This is federal dollars, state dollars, that they want their own police department. Richard Zott, who's the director of security for MetroLink, wants to be called police chief. It's a great career move on his part. People down there want this to happen. And so what they're doing is they're creating this controversy. This is a self-generated controversy. They could have brought all of this stuff up at the last MetroLink meeting they had. They opted to give it to Tony Messenger. So that, I think, should start to tell you a little bit about how their side is operating. I know that there's disagreement between the county administration and MetroLink. That's for them to solve. But what I can tell you is when you start going after police officers and generating controversy that could be handled very easily by just taking a little bit of time to look into these matters, then you would have some facts on board that could have negated a lot of this controversy.
Richard Zott is a new name on the scene, not known to a lot of people until this story. He works for MetroLink. He has quite a bit of a background in law enforcement. What can you tell us about him? Because you've had some pretty. What are your thoughts on Richard Zott as this all goes?
Well,
through?
I'm going to tell you. So, not only do we believe that this is kind of a collusive act between Vince Shamel, Richard Zott, and the guy that runs the NAACP in the city, Adolphus Pruitt, that they want their own MetroLink police department. And we don't need another police department in the St. Louis area. There's 3 agencies that work on MetroLink. It can be worked out. Things will work out just fine when calm, cool, collected heads come together. The problem is that Richard Zott doesn't have any interest in solving these problems. He wants to continue these problems because he wants his own police department. That's what he wants. That's what these other entities want. It's a power move, and that's why. So you see the article come out on Friday, and Vince Shamel's asking for Belmer to resign or be fired on Monday. You said it yourself the other day. You said, I'll paraphrase, but you said, why is it every time the Cardinals lose, they're calling for the man Matheny to resign?
Right.
You know, I mean, that's this new wave in this country that every time something happens that someone doesn't like, they want everyone around to resign. And that's just not simply the answer here. Having Chief Belmar resign is maybe one of the silliest things I've ever heard, and it was an orchestrated move against this police department, against Steve Stanger. They're really upset about Proposition P passing and all of these great things. They finally got somebody to take the story, and it was Tony Messenger. And there are layers and layers and layers of this onion. So what we did was, when we started looking into this thing, everybody that we talked to, folks in the city, people in St. Louis County, elected officials, community leaders, it all kept coming back to Richard Zott. We, the St. Louis County Police Association, just this morning, after investigating several of these incidents and these accusations and these allegations and realizing that they're largely false or based on half-truths, have now voted, and we are calling for Richard Zott to resign or be fired from Metro so that we can put somebody in charge of those security guards, because they're not police officers, they're security guards. We want to put somebody in there who can work with actual police departments to start solving some of the problems down there.
All right, so you're saying, as Gabe Crocker, as a spokesperson for the St. Louis County Police Union, you're saying that your members voted this morning, and
the executive board.
The executive board voted this morning.
Yes.
And is calling for Richard Zott, who is a director at Bi-State,
yes,
to be fired.
Yes, based on lying to Tony Messenger, providing false information to Tony Messenger. Maybe if Richard Zott spent a little less time trying to look at police officers naked in the locker room and handing those videos over to the media, maybe what he could do is start sitting down with Chief Belmer, sitting down with the acting chief of St. Louis City, and start solving some of these problems with Metro. I could go on and on and on, McGraw, but the media, the Post-Dispatch, has really latched onto this thing. They're actually identifying incidents as involved with the MetroLink that aren't anywhere near MetroLink. So because it's getting the headlines, it's irresponsible journalism, it's unethical, and again, Richard Zott, Vince Shamel, and these other groups are acting in a collusive manner. They did the same thing to Jeff Rorta not even 3 or 4 months ago, where they all got together and there's all these articles, hit pieces hitting at a certain time, Thursday RFT, Friday Tony Messenger, Monday another article, and the very guy that orchestrated the whole thing is now Lyda Cruzan's chief spokesperson. That's a small world when you're working for the Post-Dispatch writing anti-law enforcement articles and then go to work for the mayor of the city of St. Louis.
All right, let's keep Rorta out of this.
Sure.
At least for now.
No,
One story at a time.
I just wanted the parallel.
Right.
Because that's how these groups operate.
The St. Louis County Metro Link have security officers.
Yes.
That are or are not police officers.
They are not police officers. Some of them, after usually having been fired from one of the 85 municipal governments that we have here in St. Louis County,
right,
have taken a security guard position under the director of security there, Richard Zott.
And they have the ability to write fare jumping tickets.
They used to. What we were running into is a problem. Again, this is where the bigger folks need to come in and figure this out. They were in one area they're allowed to write fare tickets, and in another area they are not. From the St. Louis County Police Association standpoint, we do not believe that security guards should have full arrest powers and detention powers and writing ticket powers.
Right, because they're not police officers.
They're not a police officer. So, some of them are former officers.
Right.
But if I leave today and take a security guard position at a mall,
right,
I am no longer a police officer.
So if a security detail at MetroLink sees a drug deal goes by, sees a shooting, sees an old lady being robbed, can they stop that? Can they arrest anybody? What are their powers?
They have limited powers in those situations. Usually you're going to want a police officer there.
Gotcha.
They have the ability to take some enforcement action, as we would expect, but by and large, they are the physical presence of security, whereas police officers are the arrest arm, the actual enforcement arm of Metro Security.
And this security falls under the purview of this Richard Zott.
The security officers are who he is in charge of.
And just got some breaking news here. Just so we understand it.
Yes.
Your executive board, the St. Louis County Police Association's executive board, this morning voted and have calling for Richard Zott to be fired from Metro.
You bet. We believe, based on a couple of different grounds. One, that a lot of the fabricated stories that he gave to Tony Messenger, which have now been published as truth, are actually false. We also believe that Mr. Zott may have become aware of litigation that several officers were considering in regards to being recorded possibly while they were naked, or other hidden cameras that were put in areas where officers were nude. And so we were looking at, and by the way, I have permission from these officers to share it, because we believe that to avoid that controversy, he may have tried to subvert that by releasing this stuff while he did, because he knew officers were considering legal action against him and Metro for secretly recording police officers.
Do you have a problem with Vince Shamel still being the head of Bi-State and Metro?
I mean, listen, these people have lived off of the tax dollar for so long, they're used to it. I don't have much to say about Vince Shamel. I think it's a little inappropriate for him to wait about 48 hours to call for the resignation. But by the way, that's the cookie-cutter process that works very well in this country. Something happens over here, and they're calling for, resignations and firings and heads to roll because they want knee-jerk reaction.
That is St. Louis policeman Gabe Crocker, who is speaking for the St. Louis County Police Association. A little bit of news for you this morning. And
that's right.
Bigger news that he is supporting Belmore and Steve Stanger.
Sure. Hey, you know what? Listen, I've always been open and honest with your listeners. There's been times where I've had disagreements with both of those gentlemen. But you know what? They heard my side. Sometimes it's public. Sometimes it isn't. What I can tell you in this case is they have my, undivided support, because this is a hit job.
Gabe Crocker, thanks. You're always welcome here.
Thanks, McGraw.
9:32, Big